Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love, with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. My mission is to expand the conversation of love in the world. Is it possible to have deep, loving, healthy relationships? Have you ever been curious about having more than one relationship or partner at a time? Get ready to transform in love, be courageous, and set yourself free. In this show, we talk about relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show starts now. Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love. And today we are talking about the Trans Day of Remembrance. And before I introduce my absolutely phenomenal guest, lucky to call him a dear friend of mine, I just want to remind you that the Elizabeth Cunningham Show airs live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time on the Transformation Network Facebook page, and is then aired on YouTube and podcast every single Thursday. All links are in the show notes. Remember to hit all the bells and whistles so that you get notified, so that you never miss an episode with one of my amazing guests as we talk about transforming in love and relationships. So on today's episode, we will be talking with Luckie Alexander about the Trans Day of Remembrance. Luckie Alexander is the founder of Invisible Men, is a trans man who is an advocate exacting change that builds bridges within the LGBTQIA community and creates resources and support around transmasculine folks and trans parents. He is a member of several organizations, including the Los Angeles County Transgender Advisory Council, TAC, the CHIPTS UCLA CAB Member, mouthful, HIV Commissioner, Here's to Life, Global LGBTQ Ambassador, and National COVID Impact Advisory Councilmember, Chair of WeHo Trans Advisory Board, and the artist of the All Black Lives Matter mural on Hollywood Blvd, and wait for it. And he just published his first book called The In-Between by Luckie Alexander. Oh my gosh. Get your copy, and we will put, and I'm going to put silly me, I didn't put the link in the show notes yet, but I will do that.
Yes, you can find me on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. Exactly. Just look it up. The In-Between by Luckie Alexander on Amazon. Please go check that out. Welcome, Luckie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for bringing me back. I absolutely love having conversations with you.
Oh my gosh. It's so great. It's so fun. I'm so glad. I'm so happy mad that, Calendly only lets you talk for 45 minutes. Just or else we would just talk. None of this would ever get done. You would have never written a book. We would just talk all the time.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, no, thank you so much for being on the show. And the Trans Day of Remembrance is November 20th, which is coming up. So I'm very excited to talk with you. This is such an important topic. I'm so glad that we're talking about this on election day as well. There's so much that's going on in the world right now that is important to talk about, especially around trans rights. Right. And so I'm just absolutely honored to have you on again to have this conversation. Just couldn't have planned it better if we did, which we did.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to kind of go into it, Trans Day of Remembrance was started, and it was triggered in 1998 by Rita Hester's death. And even to this day, her death still hasn't been solved, and the investigation still hasn't been solved. So every year we look at so many deaths around our community, and when we look at these deaths, not only are we looking at the murders, but also we also have to remember those folks that have died um, via suicide, and it's always going to be around the same things around transphobia, right? So whether it's someone that died by their own hand or someone that was killed by another hand, it's the reason is always the same. It's always transphobia.
Yeah, I unfortunately was privy to a conversation that actually just happened earlier today that really broke my heart. I'm again like really glad that we're having this conversation because the sentiment of that conversation was trans people commit suicide not because of transphobia, not because people hate them, but because they hate themselves. Like that was the sentiment of the conversation, and it was really heartbreaking because some people really do believe that, people
Right.
believe that trans people are sick, that they that there's something wrong with them, and that they hate themselves, and that they're confused, and that's why, and I know that, we're not just talking about suicide, but we're also talking about trans people being murdered
Hmm.
as well. But some people really truly believe that that's why trans people kill themselves, and not because that their community, their families, their, the people that are supposed to love them hate them.
And just to kind of address that particular point, as a survivor of several suicide attempts, and also as a researcher, as someone that has looked at the data and has looked at the statistics, statistically, transmasculine folks attempt suicide at 55%, whereas our general population is at somewhere between 14.9 and 15%. Um, and as a trans person, so I'm going to speak from the lucky, right? Um, I don't deal with mental health issues because I'm trans. I deal with mental health issues because of the way that I'm treated because I'm trans, right? Um, being that I transitioned in Compton, I transitioned in a space that is predominantly black. And historically, black communities have not been very affirmative when it comes to LGBT identities. And so, looking at that and knowing firsthand what that experience is like, I was beaten up, okay, pretty brutally for a solid 2 years, just because I was transitioning, just because I did appear differently, and I showed up differently in the world. And so, if I wasn't given a chance to transition, or that wasn't an option, then suicide would have been my only other option, right? And so I did love myself enough to take that step out on the ledge and say, you know what, regardless of how other people feel about the way that we move and navigate, which I really don't understand why that's a problem, because like I don't live in your house. I don't kiss your wife goodbye in the morning. I am not interacting with you on that level. So why would you worry so much about what I'm doing in my own house and what I'm doing with my body? But again, we transition because we do love ourselves. We transition because we want to give ourselves a shot at life, and a shot at life where it is advantageous for us to transition, because otherwise we're going to be miserable. Otherwise, we're going to be in spaces where we just rather not be here. Right. And so, even more so, when we look at the intersectionality between being trans and being black, and looking at what it looks like to be a black male, especially right now with the whole George Floyd and all of the things that came after that, right? And looking at what is it like to be black, and what is it like to be black and male, and assumed masculine in ways that I don't show up that way. You know what I mean? I don't show up in your run of the mill masculine ways, although I present very masculine in person, right? I'm a pretty tall dude, 5'11", about a good 250, and so I look like any other cis male walking down the street. Um, and that puts me in a really weird situation, because not only can I not be black and trans at the same time in a lot of black spaces, but I'm also looked at as a cis male. So that looks like being a threat. Like you are a threat to the outside world because that's what people have been brought up to think, right? And it's part of those stereotypes. It's part of those um, the ways that it's part of those biases, right? And all of those different things that people hold. But me being trans, me transitioning is what made me a happier person. It brought the me out of me.
Yeah, and first of all, I'm so happy that you are able to just be you and like you said, that you loved yourself enough to not take your own life, to really be like, no, I'm actually going to express myself and be loved for who I am,
Right.
rather than not be here. I'm so happy that you made that choice, and that's all I'm going to say about that, or else I'll start crying. Um, and and one of the, I mean, there's so many nuggets out of what you just said. But I think one of the overarching things is that you can't separate people's identities,
Right.
right? Like you can't, like, even though there's situations where you may pass as a cis man, it doesn't make you that,
Right.
right? Like you can't separate your transness from your blackness. You can't separate, your transness from how you present, to people in the world. And we're gonna take a really quick break. But what I want to talk about when we come back, what I'm going to ask you about when we come back, is the, like, our identities, like how we identify, and why it's so important to not just talk about how we identify, but why we identify that way,
Right.
and why other people identify that way. I think one of the things that is the crux of this even being a debate, which you're right, like, it's stupid that this is a debate. It's stupid that it's a debate that you are just yourself. It's
Right.
dumb. And but I think one of the reasons why it is because we don't ask those questions. Why do we identify this way?
Right.
Why do you feel that way? Why do other people feel the way that they do? Right. And so that's one of the questions that I want to talk about when we get back.
Great. I'm for it.
All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love. And we are here talking with Luckie Alexander about Trans Remembrance Day, what it is, why it's important, why we're even talking about it in the first place. And one of the things that we left off with last segment was, look, what is identity?
Right.
Like, we don't question, there's like the standard of, I don't want to, and I'm not going to take this over. I just love this. I do love this question. So I don't want to nerd out too hard. I want to let you answer. But, like, what is identity? Why is it important to talk about?
Well, one, identity, the labels themselves give us autonomy to name who we are, right? It's a it's a way to convey what identity is, right? And we all have to remember that when we were born, we were assigned a sex at birth, right? They didn't ask the baby and say, "Hey, how do you feel? Like, who are you?" Right? Because we're babies. But we're assigned genders at birth. We're assigned these things. And even our names, we don't get to choose our names. Our parents choose our names and they assign a name to us. Which doesn't mean that some folks that do identify with those things that are assigned at birth, right? Most folks do. For trans folks, we just don't. Especially when it comes to gender, because when we look at biological sex, we look at gender and we look at the way that those things are labeled. Gender is a social construct. It is something that we've spent less time looking at the binary than we have celebrating all of these other genders that have existed for eons and eons of years, right? So um, when we talk about why we identify in the ways that we do, we have to go back to colonialism and look at like how gender a gender binary was used in order to control the masses, to control the people in which, you know, they were encountering. And so that's going to be a lot of why we identify in the ways that we do, because of the way that has been instilled and passed down, right? But then when we look at a lot of these identities around sexuality, around gender presentation and identity, and we look at all of the other intersectionalities that we identify with, all of those things keep us grounded. All of those things keep us in a space where we know where we come from, right? And a lot of those identities are tied to culture. A lot of those identities may be tied to ethnicity or race. But I also think that these labels are just as divisive as they are empowering, right? Because as we start to label subsets of people, and we get smaller and smaller, you know, contingents of people, right? Now we take away a lot of those powers that we have as a group, especially when we talk about movements, especially when we're talking about things like the LGBT movement or the Black movement, or this or that. And once we start to divide those down into smaller pieces, now we've taken the power from the people into the individual, and the individual is not nearly as strong as a community or a village.
Excuse me, I put myself on mute so I could cough a little bit. Um, just getting over a little bit of a cold. But yeah, and I think that in talking about gender, and I want to, because oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack, and there's just a lot in what you said, and I want to make sure that it's not missed. And so when we talk about gender and the gender binary being a construct,
hmm
can you share a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Because historically, when we look at the history of gender, and we look at the history of how it came about, this binary, um, it only goes back to colonization, right? And before then, we were given so many different options, and in so many different cultures, like especially around trans folks and folks that are gender variant. Um, Within those cultures, trans folks were uplifted, trans folks were revered. These folks were the ones that were blessing children. These were the ones that were blessing marriages and unions, and all of these other things, right? And doing rituals and all of these. And the history keepers, they were the ones that passed down lineage. And so when we talk about the binary, it was constructed by people, it was constructed by the colonizers in order to better keep control of the slave population that they were enslaving. They were um, taking and stripping all of their traditions and stripping all of their languages and all of the things that they knew in order to reinstill this new ideal, right? And so when we talk about um, gender, if we look historically at all of the many different ways that they are expressed, right? And when we break it down to just the binary, now we're cutting ourselves off to so many other options, right? Or so many other ways to show up and be expressive. But like I said, that binary was created to control the masses. It was created to control the slaves. It was created to control indigenous people that were already here when, you know, colonizers showed up. And so all of those things were stripped, stuff that they had held on to for centuries and centuries and centuries was just taken away from them because they needed a way to control those folks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for going into that a little bit further. Yeah, and when we talk about why talk about identity, I think the history is really important. And I also think that it's important for the individual as well. And
Mhm.
I think that one of the benefits of being um, trans, of being in the LGBTQIA community, of being an identity where you have to discover it for yourself, regardless of what the general population believes, is that we do have this gift of who am I? Of answering that question and discovering that question for ourselves. But I also think that the people who do more closely, like, I have identified as a cis female, my entire life. And so in questioning my gender identity, it's also brings up this question of what does it mean to be,
Mm-hmm.
a woman? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be trans? And then you break down into this question of like, what even is femininity and masculinity? And then androgyny gets pulled into that. What is androgyny? And the more and more and more that you look into these things of like, well, it's almost like the question of like, well, what is possible here?
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think that when we look at it, like when it comes all the way down to it, when we get all the way down to like the core of this is about autonomy, right? This is about personal autonomy. And I think that being trans or being within the trans community under that umbrella, I absolutely think that non-binary folks, right, have the most freedom, have the very most freedom to kind of oscillate and be in the space and get to choose who they are at all times. Because even though I identify as a binary um, trans man, right, I would love to have that kind of autonomy. I would love to have that kind of freedom to just be like, yeah, this is who I am now. I might be someone else in a minute. You know what I mean? Or this is how I feel comfortable presenting, and I may present differently tomorrow, right? But to have that freedom, I think is beautiful. I think it's super powerful because they get to make that choice whenever they choose. Right. And for me, as a binary man, I still have these boxes that I'm stuck in. I still have these boxes where I'm expected to perform my masculinity in very specific ways. But as a trans man, I get to reimagine what masculinity looks like and reimagine what manhood is for me. And I'm able to pave my own road as to what masculinity and manhood looks like.
Brilliant. And I think that that is one of the gifts of being in this conversation, of breaking down these things that we're just told, and that most people, and if you generally fit into that box, then you just take that on,
Right.
right? Like that's just what we do, and that's okay. And having the ability to have these conversations. And what's coming up for me is the counter argument that people have, which is, and I'm always curious about why people ask these questions. Like, even if I don't necessarily follow, like my brain doesn't follow the same path of this, I'm curious why people ask these questions. Like, why do people get so afraid of people having that autonomy and identity? Like, why do people get so afraid that you wouldn't identify as a man or as a woman? Like,
Well,
why is that so threatening?
well, I feel like they can't control it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like down at the bottom, again at the core, right? It can't be controlled. It can't be harnessed, right?
Mhm.
Because that's a freedom that you can't contain. And so I think that if folks can't control it, then they don't like it. Or if it's new, right? If and for us it's not new. This is our existence. It has been, it will always be. Um but I do think that there is one a factor of control, and two, it's something that's new to the greater population because now it's not that trans folks are just now popping up. It's now that we're not sitting in the shadows anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I I'm so happy for that. And it's a long road ahead.
For sure.
Yeah. And I'm really, there's like three things that I want to say, but we need to go on break. But what I will say is that I implore anybody who's listening to question your own identity. Why do you feel the way that you do? Why? Why? Like a petulant 5-year-old. Why do you believe that about yourself? Why? Who told you that? Why? Why do you have to be that way? Says who? Yeah. That is my challenge. That's what I'm going to use up this last 30 seconds with. All right, we're going to go on break, and then we're going to talk about your book.
Okay.
About why you wrote it and what's in it and everything about it. And I'm super excited about it. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back from break. We are still here with Luckie Alexander talking about Trans Day of Remembrance. And before we get into Luckie's book, he just wants to say a few more things about the Trans Day of Remembrance. So take it away.
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, Trans Day of Remembrance started in '98 with Rita Hester, and in '99 it kind of jumped off and became a recognized day for trans folks. The 2 weeks prior to is Trans Awareness Month for November, and so if you have trans folks in your space or if you have trans folks in your life, then just huddle around them and give them a hug, because this is the time of year that's really pretty somber for us, because Trans Day of Remembrance remembers all of those folks that have been murdered. Last year was one of the deadliest years at something like, I think it was close to 50 murders, or 53 if I'm not mistaken, which is a lot of people. We only make up 2% of the population. So all the folks that we're losing, like there was 310 people that were killed last year globally. And so Brazil is one of the highest, between Brazil and another one of the Latin American countries is the highest of rates of murder for trans folks. But just recognize that trans folks are being murdered, and this is the November 20th is the day that we honor those folks that have been snatched away from us. And if you are an ally and you show up in the trans community, thank you. And if you're wanting to be an ally, remember it's a verb. Like, really step in, show up for trans folks, and challenge the status quo, challenge the homophobia, challenge the transphobia, challenge all of those things that are harmful for these LGBT communities.
Yeah, thank you. What is like top 3 actions that you can do as an ally?
Top 3 actions: step in when you see something happening. Okay, that's first and foremost. If you see someone being catcalled, if you see someone being harassed, step in. Be that voice that says that's not right, because a lot of times our cis counterparts are going to hear it from their own, right? And 2, donate to trans organizations. So there are plenty of trans-led organizations all over the country. I have one, Invisible Men, but donate to trans orgs, because we're out here doing the work for our communities. Help us get there. 3rd, I would say talk to your legislators. Okay, there are over 200 anti-trans or anti-LGBT bills, rather, and of those, at least 50 of those are anti-trans bills. In Florida, all of the medical care for trans folks is gone. Period. Point blank. It's gone. They just passed a law. They do not provide trans care for trans folks in Florida, right? So all of those folks that are currently in transition, or trying to be in transition, or trying to get gender affirming surgeries, all of those things have been taken away from those folks. So now they have to go to other places to access those things. So talk to your legislators. Vote. Today is the voting day. Vote, vote, vote. I can't tell anybody more. Vote, right? So look at those initiatives, pay attention to the initiatives. If you see something, say something, just like they say for everything else. Make sure that when you go to vote, that those bills that are anti-trans, we don't support those.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I like having like solidified action plans.
For
Go
sure.
do this thing
Right. Go
right
vote,
now.
step in, and donate to trans-led orgs.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you.
No
All right.
problem.
Anything else you want to say before we talk up your book?
Trans folks are awesome.
It's true. It's so true. Trans folks are awesome. Yeah, like seriously, I mean, like, if I could just bop everybody on the head and just be like, listen, we're all human.
There you go. There you go. That's all we need. There you go.
Like, we're all human trying to be human and trying to live our lives. Like, no
100%.
one, no group of people with some identity, trans people are not out to get you. Trans people just want to live their lives, okay?
NP.
And yeah, and go pee. It's very important.
Bathroom bills.
Actually, that reminds me of I love Saw Guru. Like I love his like little video clips. It's so
Do
you know that guy?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I don't agree with everything that he says, but like what a cool dude, right? And
Right.
he's like this old Indian yogi that like travels around on a motorcycle. Like, how is he not so cool? But one of the things that oh, and then I'm gonna forget what he said. Oh yeah, one of the things he said was like, I can teach you about enlightenment, and you can teach other people about enlightenment, but only when they're willing to listen to you about enlightenment.
True.
Like,
Absolutely.
and if someone needs to pee really bad, they're not going to listen to you about enlightenment.
There you go. There you
They're
go.
just going to want to go pee.
True.
So recognize
True.
where people are at.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just thought that was the most hilarious way to put, like, just meet people where they're at.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely, for sure.
Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about your book.
Right.
Okay, so it's The In Between. Got this awesome copy. So what is this book about, and what inspired you to write it?
So I've been writing this book for, I'd have to say 12 years now, because the oldest piece that's in the book is for 2010. And so what it is first, I called it The In Between because I do a lot. You read my bio, and that's only half of what I do. So this book is all the things that I do in between working, right? So this is my hobby. This is where my heart and my brain kind of meet, right? And so I started off as a digital creator, as a digital artist, and I used to do flyers, used to do all kind of stuff. But as technology has gotten better, I figured out that the digital pad, I can draw on that. And I was like, ooh. And I started to really like layer and layer and layer and find new tools and new things that I could create with. And so the book has some stories. It's got a lot of short stories. It's got some poetry, and it's got art that I've created throughout the book. Yes. Yes. Too many tasks. Yes. And so when I go through and I'm creating, it's just like things that I need to get out of my head, things that I need people to hear, but I have no way of executing a lot of that because I'm always working, right? So I just write it in my notebooks, and I've got stacks on stacks on stacks of notebooks that I've just compiled into this book. And this is only a handful of what I have, but this is literally my brain in a book. Like I just puked my brain into a book, and this is what you get, right? But it was yes, yes.
Trying to see if I can. It's on the screen. There we go.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yes. And so I had a lot of fun with this. I was incredibly scared to publish it, but once I got it published, I was like, hey, this is great. It's out there now, you know. But there's a little bit of advocacy in there, but it's mostly personal thoughts. It's mostly struggles that I've been through. It's mostly, heartbreak. It's love. It's all the things. Everything's in the book.
It's all the things that make you human.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the art that's in the book is when I couldn't find words for what I was thinking. And so I created my brain on canvas. I created my thoughts. Yes, collision of thoughts. Yes, that is my favorite piece
I love it so much.
out of all of them. And collision of thought is actually pretty cool because I worked on that for maybe 3-4 weeks because I needed it to look like the conflict in my brain. I needed it to look like the things that I'm going through because with collision of thought, it's a lot. One, I'm ADHD, so I'm always got thoughts like they're flying, and a lot of times they're
all the time,
conflicting
everywhere.
thoughts. Right, and a lot of times they're conflicting thoughts, and so that's what a lot of collision of thought is.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And who do you I mean, like, oh my gosh, like all of this artwork, like you just can like flip through it and it's just like absolutely gorgeous and amazing. And really some of it's like really emotional. Well, a lot of it's really emotional, but like
Survival of slavery.
Yeah. And who would you say that, I know that this book is like really for you, this book is like for you and like your thoughts and just like getting you out into the world, but how do you think that this book is going to help people?
I think one, it's going to humanize my being. It's going to humanize, like who I am and as a person, as a trans person. But also there are pieces in there that are very specific to the trans community, the transmasculine community in particular. I think that it's going to give them a reflection. They'll see themselves. Yes, fatherhood. Yes, they'll see themselves reflected in those different pieces. And so I hope that it's going to give folks a little something to look at and say, I see myself here.
Oh, there you go. Here's one that says evolving while trans.
Right.
Yeah. For those people who are listening to the podcast, I'm so sorry you can't see these images. You're just going to have to buy the book.
It's on Amazon.
There you go. No, I think that, I mean, it's really beautiful. And I agree with you. It's exactly like you said, where it's just raw human emotion and your life and your experience. And I truly believe, I was asking the question earlier, like, what is going to, I'm always asking the question in my brain, like, what is going to make the biggest difference? Why is this a conflict? And what is going to make a biggest difference in this not being a conflict?
Right.
And I don't think that it's ever a question of knowing more facts. I personally believe that it's a question of connecting as human beings, understanding one another, understanding that we're so much more similar than we are different, and being able to connect on that human level. But then as much as we're similar, then being able to celebrate how different we are too.
True. And I think people need to ask themselves one question when they're looking at trans folks. Why do I care? Why does it matter to me? Right? And if they ask that one question, it may keep them from doing something stupid.
Thank you. Yeah. Why do I care? Why does this matter to me so much?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Well, we're going to go on our last break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to wrap things up just ridiculously beautifully.
Fantastic.
That's what we're going to do. All right. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding love. And we are here with Luckie Alexander talking about the Trans Day of Remembrance, hiccup, the Trans Day of Remembrance, and also his new book, which is The In-Between. And we are wrapping up our conversation here, and I promised before break that we were going to wrap up this conversation ridiculously beautifully, and that's what we're exactly going to do right now. Okay, fantastic. Luckie, what does love mean to you?
Love. Oh, love is one of the most fantastic things ever. Love means that I'm comfortable in my skin. Love means that I can walk through this world and just be me, right? And accept every flaw about me. Love means so many different things. There's so many facets to it. There's so many different um, factors to kind of factor in when it comes to love, right? But when we talk about romantic love, I think that's just unadulterated connection.
Mm.
You know, and connection in every sense of the word, whether it's communication through verbal, whether it's a hug, you know, whatever that looks like, just understanding one another and seeing one another in those spaces, right? Um, I love love. I love the concept of love. I love every different way that love can show up. So for sure.
Beautiful. Thank you.
No problem.
If people got nothing else out of this episode, what is the thing that you hope that they got?
One, stop killing trans people. But above that, just love one another. Like, trans people are people. We're not ETs or aliens or extraterrestrials. We're just people, right? And we deserve to be respected. And go buy my book.
And go buy my book.
So yeah, for sure. But for sure, like above and beyond everything else, like people are people and trans people are people, and they need to be respected and cared for.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
What's an action that people can take?
Go buy my book.
Go buy my book.
But in all reality, right, so yes, go buy my book, but also care for those folks that are in your space, trans or not, right? Like, everyone needs love, everyone needs to be affirmed, everyone needs to be validated. So love on your people, and especially if they're trans, like, intentionally seek them out to love on them.
Thank you. All right, so I already know, everyone already knows the answer to this next question. I'm gonna ask it anyway. What are you promoting, Luckie?
My book. The In-Between.
The In-Between. Everyone go buy, and again, I'm going to put this in the show notes. I feel very silly for not having done that before the show. But I'm going to do that immediately upon closing. And for everyone who's listening to the aired version on Thursday, it is in the show notes. So I'm just saying that for the people who are listening live, it's not in the show notes. But for everyone who's listening not live, it's already in the show notes. Go scroll down, click on, there's going to be a link that says buy Luckie's book, The In-Between, and then you can just click on it. You can go buy it. Please support Luckie, support his organization, Invisible Men. You can go to invisiblemen.org. That's also in the show notes as well.
It's Invisible T-Men.
Oh, Invisible T-Men. Oh my God. Okay.
.org. Yeah, so it's invisibletmen.org.
.org. Okay, beautiful. All right, how else can people find you?
You can find us on Instagram. You can find me Luckie, Alexander common spelling on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, and you can find Invisible Men on Facebook and Instagram, and then also the website. So invisible, the letter T in the middle, MEN.org.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Absolutely.
Yes, it has been an absolute pleasure having you. I love you. I adore you. I'm so happy, proud, and also upset that you are doing the work that you're doing in the world. You know, I'm happy for you and I'm proud of you and I love you for doing it. And I wish that you didn't have to.
Right.
So that is why everybody who's listening, please go support so that Luckie doesn't have to do this work anymore. Like, let's eradicate like the work of not murdering trans people.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great.
For sure. Let's keep trans people alive. Go save some trans people alive.
Let's save some trans people. Let's just like love on people, you know?
There you go. There you go.
Okay, but anyway, thank you everyone who has been listening to the podcast. Thank you everyone who has been watching the live. Thank you for everyone who is watching the YouTube video right now. Thank you so much for your support, for your interest, for your willingness to learn, to be open. Thank you for your support of trans people. Thank you for your support of the trans Black community. Thank you for your support. Thank you. You can watch episodes of the Elizabeth Cunningham Show every single Thursday, or every single Tuesday at 3 p.m. live, and then every single Thursday the podcast and YouTube is aired. And until next time, keep loving, y'all. You have been listening to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where we shed light on relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. Learn to love yourself and create the relationships you want. Connect with me at elizabethannecunningham.com. That's elizabethannecunningham.com.